High Reddit, throwaway account. I didn't know where else to put this, and I need to get it out of my head before it eats me alive. I used to believe betrayal was loud, explosive, that it announced itself with slammed doors, raised voices, maybe a glass shattering against a wall. I was wrong. Betrayal is quiet. It slips into your life barefoot and sits down beside you, breathing the same air, wearing a familiar face. That night I came home later than usual. The hallway light was off, the house dim in a way that felt intentional, not accidental. My shoes sounded too loud on the floor, each step echoing as if the walls were paying attention. I remember thinking how still everything felt. I set my keys down carefully, too carefully. My body was already negotiating with something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. From the bedroom, a thin strip of warm light leaked under the door. She usually sleeps by now, I thought. Maybe she's reading. I stood there longer than I should have, my hand hovering near the doorframe, my breath shallow. My chest felt tight, like I'd inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. When I pushed the door open slowly, the room greeted me with the wrong kind of warmth. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a blanket that wasn't folded the way she usually did it. Her hair was loose, not the lazy knot she wore to sleep. She looked up at me too quickly. Too alert. "Hey," she said. Her voice was soft but strained, like a note held just a second too long. "Hey," I answered. Our eyes locked and something invisible snapped between us. I felt it in my stomach first, a sinking, hollow sensation, then in my fingers, which suddenly felt numb. There was a smell in the room, not perfume, not mine, something unfamiliar, faint but undeniable. "Don't jump to conclusions," I told myself. "You're tired, you're projecting." "How was work?" she asked. I watched her mouth form the words, watched the way her shoulders were tense, her posture guarded. She was sitting upright, not relaxed, defensive. "Fine," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it didn't belong to me. Silence settled between us, thick and awkward. I took a step closer, then another. My body felt heavy, like it was moving through water. Each step sent a pulse through my legs, grounding me too much in the present. My eyes drifted to the nightstand. 2 glasses. One was mine, I recognized the faint chip on the rim. The other was. I felt my heartbeat in my ears, slow, deliberate, almost calm in a terrifying way. "Did someone come over?" I asked. She swallowed. I saw it, the movement of her throat, the hesitation that lasted barely a second too long. "No," she said, then quickly, "I mean just Sarah earlier." "Sarah doesn't drink whiskey." My fingers curled into my palm, nails pressing into skin. The sensation anchored me, sharp and real. I needed it. I nodded once, not because I believed her, but because something inside me wanted to see how far she'd go. "Okay," I said. She exhaled, relief flickering across her face before she could stop it. That was the moment. Not the glasses, not the smell, not even the lie. It was the relief. Something cold settled in my chest, spreading slowly, methodically. I felt it in my shoulders as they stiffened, in my jaw as my teeth pressed together. I turned away first. I didn't trust myself to look at her any longer. That night I lay beside her without touching her. The space between our bodies felt wider than the bed itself. I stared at the ceiling, counting breaths, listening to the rhythm of her breathing shift once she thought I was asleep. How long has this been happening? Who is he? What did I do wrong, or did I do anything wrong at all? Questions spiraled, sharp and relentless. But beneath them something else began to form. Not anger, not yet. Resolve. Betrayal doesn't always demand confrontation. Sometimes it demands patience. I decided in that dark, silent room that I wouldn't explode. I wouldn't accuse. I wouldn't beg for the truth. I would wait. And when the truth finally surfaced, because it always does, I would be ready. If this post gets any traction, I'll continue. I don't know yet whether I'm writing this for advice, validation, or just to leave a record of the moment everything quietly broke. Update/part 2 still can't sleep. Writing this instead. The next morning didn't arrive with clarity. It arrived with weight. I woke before the alarm, my eyes opening into the gray half-light that seeps through curtains just before dawn. My body felt tense, like I'd been holding a pose all night and forgot how to relax out of it. My jaw ached from clenching. My shoulders were tight, knotted. She was still asleep beside me. I turned my head slowly, carefully, as if any sudden movement might fracture something fragile. She lay on her side, facing away from me, her back curved gently, the blanket pulled up to her shoulders. Her breathing was even, peaceful. Too peaceful. I studied the familiar line of her neck, the soft skin there, the place where I used to press my lips without thinking. My chest tightened, not with longing but with a dull, persistent ache. How can you sleep? How can you look so calm? I slipped out of bed without touching her. The floor was cold under my feet, grounding in a way I almost welcomed. In the bathroom, I splashed water on my face and stared at my reflection. I barely recognized myself. My eyes looked darker, heavier. There was a rigidity in my expression, something set and unmoving. I leaned closer to the mirror, gripping the edge of the sink, feeling the porcelain bite into my palms. Don't rush, I reminded myself. Observe, collect, understand. That became my mantra. At breakfast she acted normal, or what passed for normal now. She poured coffee, asked if I wanted eggs, commented on the weather. Her voice had found its usual rhythm again, smooth and unremarkable. If I hadn't been watching so closely, I might have believed nothing was wrong. But I was watching everything. The way she avoided my eyes for just a beat too long, the way her phone never left her side, the way she angled the screen away from me, thumb hovering, always ready to lock it. Big day, she asked, buttering toast. Yeah, I said, meetings. A lie, my calendar was clear. She nodded, distracted, her attention drifting back to the phone when it vibrated softly against the table. I felt a faint, unpleasant heat bloom in my chest. Who are you talking to? What do you tell him about me? I left the house with a kiss on her cheek. It felt rehearsed, mechanical. Her skin was warm beneath my lips, familiar, and yet it made my stomach turn. Outside, the air was sharp and cool. I stood by my car for a moment longer than necessary, breathing deeply, steadying myself. That day, I didn't go to work. I parked a few blocks away from our place, somewhere inconspicuous, and waited. Time stretched, cars passed, people moved through their routines, unaware that my entire world had narrowed to a single point of focus, our front door. Around noon, she left. She was dressed differently than usual, not casual, intentional. A fitted jacket, hair styled with more care than she used for errands. I noted everything, my mind cataloging details with unsettling calm. I waited a few seconds before starting the engine. I followed her at a distance that felt safe. My hands were steady on the wheel, my heartbeat surprisingly even. There was a clarity to this, a grim sense of purpose that drowned out panic. She didn't notice me. She drove across town, away from her usual routes, into a quieter neighborhood with narrow streets and older buildings. When she parked, I did the same, farther down the block. I watched as she got out, glanced around briefly, then walked toward one of the apartment buildings. She didn't hesitate. That was the moment hope finally died. I stayed in the car, fingers resting on the steering wheel, feeling the texture of the worn leather beneath my skin. Each second ticked by, heavy and deliberate. This is it, I thought. This is where you turn back, or you don't. I didn't follow her inside. I didn't need to. The confirmation was enough. My body hummed with a low, controlled energy, like a wire pulled tight. When she eventually came back out, 43 minutes later, I noted that too. 43 minutes. She looked lighter, less guarded. There was a softness in her expression I hadn't seen directed at me in weeks. I drove home before she did. That evening, we sat on the couch together, the TV murmuring in the background. She laughed at something on the screen, leaning into me slightly. The contact sent a jolt through my body, not pleasure, but a sharp, electric awareness. Her head rested against my shoulder. I could feel the weight of it, the warmth, the subtle movement of her breath. You don't get to do this, I thought. You don't get to be comfortable. I wrapped an arm around her anyway. Revenge, I was beginning to understand, isn't always loud. It doesn't always announce itself with fury. Sometimes it's quiet, calculated. That night after she fell asleep, I took her phone. My hands were steady as I lifted it from the nightstand. I knew her passcode. Of course I did. We'd never needed secrets before. The screen lit up softly. There it was. His name. The messages were not poetic, not dramatic. They didn't need to be. They were casual, familiar, intimate in the way routine can be intimate. Can't stop thinking about today. When can I see you again? I wish you were here instead. I felt each word settle into me, heavy and cold. I didn't scroll for long. I didn't need more wounds. I took screenshots. I sent them to myself. Then I placed the phone back exactly where it had been. Lying beside her again, staring into the dark, I felt something crystallize inside me. Not rage, not sorrow. Direction. She thought she was in control. She thought she was managing this, balancing two lives, two versions of herself. She was wrong. I wasn't going to confront her yet. I was going to let her feel safe. And while she slept, breathing softly beside me, I planned. Final update, this is where it ends, or maybe where it finally begins. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. The days that followed moved with a strange duality. On the surface, our life continued as if nothing had cracked. We ate together. We talked about mundane things, bills, errands, a movie she wanted to watch. She laughed more now, lighter, freer, as if a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. That realization sat in my gut like a stone. I was the burden. At night when she slept, I lay awake, listening to the quiet mechanics of her breathing. Inhale, exhale. Sometimes she shifted closer to me, instinctively seeking warmth. Each time she did, my body reacted before my mind could intervene, muscles tightening, skin prickling where she touched me. I didn't pull away. Not yet. I started paying attention to everything. Times, patterns, excuses. Tuesdays and Thursdays were late work days. Her phone calls moved to the balcony. Messages deleted, notifications silenced. I didn't confront her about any of it. I became patient in a way I didn't recognize. There's something unsettling about discovering how calm you can become once a line is crossed. I found out who he was within a week. His name was Mark. 38, divorced, no kids, lived alone in that same apartment building, worked in marketing, ironic I thought, selling images, creating illusions. I learned his routine the same way I'd learned hers, quietly. I didn't follow them together. I didn't need to. Their digital trail told me more than enough. Photos never sent, messages archived, little inside jokes that made my jaw lock when I read them. What struck me most wasn't the affection. It was the disrespect. The casual way my existence was edited out of her life when she talked to him, as if I were an inconvenience, a footnote, something temporary she planned to erase. You don't get to erase me, I thought. I began preparing. Not theatrically, not impulsively. I wasn't interested in screaming matches or dramatic confrontations that would end with her crying and me looking like the villain. I wanted clarity. First, I spoke to a lawyer. Sitting in that clean, neutral office, I felt oddly grounded. The leather chair beneath me was firm. Solid. The lawyer's voice was calm, measured, devoid of emotion. Facts only. Infidelity, assets, documentation. I had documentation. I didn't tell my wife where I was going that day. I didn't owe her explanations anymore. Next, I secured what mattered most to me. Accounts, passwords, personal files, things I once trusted blindly. At home, she noticed a change. "You've been quiet lately," she said one evening, watching me from across the kitchen. I looked up slowly, meeting her gaze. Her eyes searched my face, trying to read something that used to be easy for her. "Just tired," I replied. She nodded, but something flickered in her expression, suspicion maybe, or guilt. Good, I thought. A week later, I invited Mark to meet me. Not directly, I didn't want him defensive. I sent him a message from a neutral account, professional, polite. I framed it as a business opportunity, consulting, collaboration, something vague enough to pique interest. He agreed. Of course he did. We met at a quiet cafe across town, neutral ground, public but private enough. I arrived early. I wanted to see him before he saw me. When he walked in, I recognized him immediately. Medium height, confident posture, well-dressed but in a calculated way, the kind of confidence that relies heavily on being wanted. He smiled when he introduced himself. That smile faded when I told him my name. I watched it happen in real time. The realization, the recalibration, the sudden tension in his shoulders. "You're her husband," he said. I nodded, calm, controlled. "Yes." Silence stretched between us. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the pause do its work. "I'm not here to fight you," I said finally. "I'm here to give you information." His jaw tightened. About what? About what happens next. I laid everything out, not emotionally, logically, screenshots, timelines, consequences. I watched his hands curl slightly around his cup. "She told me you were basically separated," he said quietly. I smiled, not warmly. "She lied," I replied, "to both of us." That was the first crack in his confidence. I didn't threaten him. I didn't need to. I simply made it clear that continuing this would cost him far more than he'd anticipated. When we parted ways, he looked smaller, less certain. That night, my wife came home early. She was restless, anxious. Her phone stayed face down on the table. "What's wrong?" I asked, genuinely curious. She hesitated, then nothing, just tired. I nodded. Later, as we lay in bed, she turned toward me, her hand resting tentatively on my arm. "You know I love you, right?" she whispered. The words hit me harder than any confession could have. "You don't even know what love is," I thought. I turned my head to face her. Our eyes met in the dark. "I know," I said. The next morning, I left before she woke. When she found the envelope on the kitchen table, everything unraveled. Inside were copies, screenshots, legal documents, a letter short, precise, unemotional. I didn't ask for explanations. I didn't ask for apologies. I told her it was over. When she called me, her voice broke in ways I'd never heard before. Panic, regret, fear. "I can explain," she sobbed. "I know," I said quietly. "You already did." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I didn't need to. That was the hardest part for her. Weeks passed. The house felt different without her. Quieter, lighter, emptier, and yet somehow fuller. I learned things about myself in that silence, about what I'd tolerated, about what I'd mistaken for love. As for Mark, he disappeared from her life within days. It didn't matter. The damage was already done. Sometimes late at night, I still replay moments in my head, the early years, the laughter, the version of her I thought I knew. There's grief in that, real grief. But there's also something else now. Clarity. Revenge wasn't destroying her life. It wasn't humiliating her or dragging her name through the dirt. Revenge was refusing to stay small, refusing to beg, refusing to be an option. Revenge was walking away with my dignity intact. If you've read this far, thank you. If you're in the middle of something similar, hear this. Silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's preparation. And sometimes, the most devastating thing you can do to someone who betrays you is live well without them.